In this lesson, I'm going to introduce you to Forex trading, or the foreign exchange market. Now, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. In the description below, you're going to find two articles. One that is referencing various Forex related terminology, and the other one that is talking quite a bit about the foreign exchange market, what it is, the characteristics, and so on. So I highly recommend you go through those documents, you read them, and try to understand them. And if there's anything within those documents that you do not understand, obviously just jump on Google, on the search engine, and just do a little bit more digging for yourself based on your interest levels and so on. But I'm going to keep this pretty simple. Foreign exchange market is the largest market in the world. It is the most liquid market in the world as well, with about this figure will change as the world prints more currency and so on, but it's over, the daily transaction volume of the foreign exchange market is over $5 trillion a day. So that's how much exchange actually happens on a day-to-day basis, over $5 trillion a day. Hence why I said it's the largest and it's the most liquid market in the world. So why does that matter to us? Well, the reason is almost entire world is focusing on the Forex market, period. Whereas if you're just focusing on the US equities market, then it's mainly North America that's focusing on the US equities market. But the foreign exchange market, the entire world is focusing on it. And the liquidity, $5 trillion a day in transaction volume, the reason why that benefits us is price action. The price action will be very clean, very simple, very consistent, and when we're trying to get into positions, we're not going to have any liquidity issues. Sometimes when you're trading equities, when you're trading stocks, or even when you're trading cryptocurrency, and you're trying to place a position at a specific level, you might not get filled exactly at the price that you want to get filled at. So your position might not be executed at the level that you want to execute it at, simply because there's not enough volume, there's not enough liquidity for your position to actually be filled. Well, in the foreign exchange market, since $5 trillion is being exchanged roughly on a day-to-day basis, liquidity is not really an issue. If you want to enter a position right now, you will be able to enter a trade, right? Simple, as simple as that. So with that said, foreign exchange market is also running 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. So pretty much opens at 22 GMT, so 10 p.m. GMT Sydney time, right? So that's when the market opens up at 22 p.m., 22 GMT, or 10 p.m. at night Sydney time. So the Asian session, that's when that opens up on Monday, right? And then it closes on a Friday at 22 p.m. again GMT, 22 GMT on a Friday, end of New York session. So it pretty much runs from Monday to Friday, as the Asian session opens up on a Monday to when the New York session closes on a Friday, and then in between it runs 24 hours a day. So it's nice that it's open like that, 24 hours a day, because again, it allows us to find opportunities throughout the day. You know, we're not going to be sitting here for 24 hours. That's never going to be a thing. But it's still nice that the market is open 24 hours a day, simply because, again, opportunities will form at different times of the day, and we don't have to pause and wait for the market to reopen the following day like the equities market. So sometimes there might be an opportunity happening within an hour, but if the equities market is closing, then we have to wait till the morning and then wake up early in the morning to execute that trade. Whereas with the foreign exchange market, if we see an opportunity happening within an hour and the market is open 24 hours, then we just execute within that hour, kind of thing. So that's the benefit of the foreign exchange market. And simply also because it's open 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, it moves a little bit faster. The price action develops a little bit faster. The strategies develop a little bit faster as well, versus the equities market, whereas it's only open during the Asian session or the New York session or the European session, the London session. If you're focusing on US equities, then it's only open during the New York session. So it's only open for a fraction of the day, not 24 hours. So price action takes longer to develop. The strategies take a little bit longer to develop themselves as well. So that's kind of like the benefit of trading the foreign exchange market. Now, with that, we will also be focusing only on the major currency pairs. So how does the Forex exchange market work? Let me jump on the charts and I'll actually talk a little bit about it. So the way the foreign exchange market works is that you've already traded the foreign exchange market yourself. If you've traveled the world and you paid with your credit card, and your credit card is based, your bank is based in Canada, but all of a sudden you're paying for something in London, then right away your bank is making a currency transaction, a currency exchange from British pound to Canadian dollar and vice versa, right? So as you're traveling the world, you're already playing within the foreign exchange market. And that's as simple as that, right? You're exchanging one currency for the next, period, right? So if you want to short the Australian dollar versus the US dollar, then you will simply be selling the Australian dollar and buying the US dollar instead, right? And this way you're shorting the Australian dollar and you're buying the US dollar. So in simple terms, that is kind of how it works. It's just a normal currency exchange, just like you would do at a bank, just like you would do at a border, or by traveling to a different country and paying with your credit card. You're making those exchanges all the time. So if we look at the chart here, this is kind of what the Forex market looks like. But on the right-hand side here, you have a list of currency pairs. So every single currency pair is tied to a specific country, to a specific currency, such as Australian dollar and US dollar, Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, Australian dollar, Swiss franc, US dollar, Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, right? And so on. So we have these major currency pairs, and the major currencies that we will be focusing on. Those major currencies are as follow. So Australian dollar is one major currency. Canadian dollar is another major currency. Swiss franc is another major currency. Euro, the European euro, is number 4. We would also have New Zealand dollar at number 5. We have the US dollar, 6, British pound, number 7, Japanese yen. I might have mixed that up a little bit, but in general, those are the major currencies. So Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, European euro, British pound, US dollar, Japanese yen, and New Zealand dollar, okay? Now, if we look at the chart here again to the right-hand side, every single one of those currencies is paired with one another, right? So we have US dollar paired with Canadian dollar paired with Swiss franc, US dollar paired with Swiss franc, euro paired with the US dollar, and so on. So in the next lesson, we're going to talk about how to make your watch list and so on. But this is pretty much how it works. So right here, I have the Australian US dollar chart. Okay, so if you see the chart going down, okay, so this is an Australian US dollar chart. If it's going down, the second pair, okay, which is in this case, it's the second currency, in this case is US dollar, okay, is actually getting stronger. Okay, so in this case, the US dollar is getting stronger against the Australian dollar. If you look at the monthly chart here on the top left, right here, when price action was going up, the Australian dollar was getting stronger against the US dollar. Here we had the recession of 2008. So during the recession, the US dollar got stronger against the Australian dollar. And then eventually the Australian dollar was getting stronger against the US dollar, right? So that's kind of how it works. Let me show you another example. Let's have a look at European euro and Australian dollar again. Or let's just switch it up totally. European euro and Canadian dollar. So same kind of idea, you know. So European euro comes first, Canadian dollar comes second in this case. And right here again, you can see on the right hand side, as price action is falling down, the Canadian dollar is getting stronger against the euro. And as price action is going up, the European euro is getting stronger against the Canadian dollar. Simple, right? It's simple. That is how it works. And again, in the documents provided in the description, you can read a little bit more about it and so on. Now, I want you to focus on the couple of things. Number one is that you're only ever going to be focusing on about 28 currency pairs, right? So when you're making a watch list, you're only looking at about 28 pairs. That's it, okay? Whereas within the US equities market, you can be looking at 50, 100, 200, 500. It really depends, right? Because it's a very big market, and that's just US equities. Here, we're just focusing on the major currency pairs, the ones that I mentioned: Australian dollar, euro, US dollar, Canadian dollar, and so on. And we're going to talk more about them in the next lesson. And because of that, it's also quicker. You know, this is a global economy, right? We're focusing on the global economy here. So what affects the foreign exchange market is, again, it's related to the global economy. It's related to the state of the various countries: Canada, US, all the nations within the European Union, UK, Australia, Japan, and so on, right? So the state of those economies affect the currency market. Versus if you're trading US equities, you're mainly focusing on the state of the company itself, such as Apple or Microsoft or Netflix. You know, so the performance of that company really determines whether the stock moves up or down. Versus here, it's the performance of the country. It's the performance of the economy of that country that actually moves price up or down. So in general, it's just a much bigger market. And also, you're only focusing ever on about 28 major pairs. Now, we also have exotic pairs such as Brazil, you know, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on. You know, those are kind of exotic currencies, and those we're not really going to be focusing on. You know, we're only focusing on the major global economies because, again, they're the most liquid. They have the highest transactions. Majority of the traders actually look at only the major pairs versus the exotics. You know, the exotic pairs can be very volatile versus the major pairs are pretty stable and have very clean price action. So that is kind of like a brief introduction to the foreign exchange market. And again, it is, for me personally, it is my favorite market to trade, simply because it's so liquid. It's open 24 hours a day. I'm only ever looking at about 28 currency pairs and only ever focusing on the major economies of those currencies. And it's just clean, period. It is just clean, simple, liquid, and it works really well within our strategies. They apply really well to this market and so on. They apply to every single one of them. But again, because the foreign exchange market is so liquid and so stable and the price action is so clean, it's just much easier to trade, in my opinion. So that is it for it's a little brief introduction to the foreign exchange market. Majority of the lessons in Trading MasterClass, we will be focusing on the price action within the foreign exchange market just because it is so clean. But again, there will be examples of the positions playing, different setups playing themselves out within equities and cryptocurrency as well. So in the next lesson, I'm going to talk about how to make your watch list, which currencies to pick, and which currencies to actually pick, and how to make your main watch list that you're going to be scanning on a day-to-day basis. But there's actually one thing, I'll talk about that in the next lesson, so don't worry about it now. But that is it. So brief introduction to the foreign exchange market. In the description below, you're going to find 2 articles, 2 documents, Forex related terminology, and another document related to specifically the characteristics of the foreign exchange market. So have a read through those, understand those documents. They're going to give you all the information that you need. This was just kind of a brief introduction, me talking about the benefits of the foreign exchange market, but the documents below have much more kind of detailed information. And again, if there's anything within the documents that really don't make sense, just jump on Google, jump on a search engine, search the terminology, search the topic, and you're going to find much more information on it. But the documents below should be sufficient for your understanding. So that is it for this introduction to the foreign exchange market. In the next lesson, we're going to focus on Forex watch list. See you there.